anything you need to know. Who, what, when, where, why, how.
You're watching Telebeltop. It's a pleasure today to have with us on Telebeltop via Zoom. Salah is the director of a human rights organization, Komala Party of Iranian in Kurdistan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I'm glad to have you as well. Let's start. In the past week, we saw the peace treaty between Israel and United Emirates Arab. What's your first reaction on that peace treaty?
Middle East, it's always been, hot spot for conflict, for civil war. It's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, very complex for people outside and for inside, of course. We have seen many wars, last 5-6 decades, unresolved conflict, between different variety, sectarian conflict, region of the coup d'etat, so all those things. So we have in mind when we talk about Middle East, and of course the birth of the old religion, come from Middle East. So beside all of this, so any peace negotiation, it's a step forward, So hopefully, finally by putting the pieces, all these pieces together, finally these people, this region, can have a sense of prosperity. It's a rich region, in mineral, in oil, natural gas, things. But of course, unfortunately, the money is spending for wars and conflict. So hopefully, we should see. I'm cautious, but it's a good step in forward.
It's a good step, but then during the presidency of Jimmy Carter in 1979, we saw a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, but the region still, there's no stability in the region. Do you think it's too early to say that peace treaty will bring stability in the region?
Yes, the last time we had any peace between Israel and Arab country, it was in 1994, in the President Clinton era, when they signed it between Jordan and Israel. It's helped, it normalized the relation between Arab world and Israel. But unfortunately, what we see, the other factor, in the region, so trying to, because we, after fall of the Soviet Union, when we saw a new wave of the Islamic hardlinism in the region, we saw terrorism, we saw things, and so that those elements try to revolve those conflicts and try to those steps which was taking place, was a lot of people hoped, end up to final stage of peace, but still not being put in the work, people can enjoy, what they want to see the peace meaning for them.
So right now, we know, and there's so many groups in the Middle East. You have the Hezbollah, the U.S. qualified Hezbollah as a terrorist group. We had another one in Palestine. And do you think those groups will accept that peace we have with the Arab world right now?
The group, the main group is non-accepting peace in Middle East is Iran, Iranian regime, so playing very destructive, policy in the region. Because since it established 1979, they said we're going to retake the what they called Quds, the place which is they think the prophet was there to to get a messenger. So all those stories, we heard. So they're not allowing to Jerusalem, things which is always been placed for all religion, for Christianity, for Jews, for Muslim, regardless of what religion they have. So they are playing, they're arming the Hezbollah. Hezbollah before 1979, it was very isolated group, with help of the Iranian, they're not armed, and they are running their Lebanon. So Hezbollah, and which is mostly Iran, is not accepting the peace process, and even Iranian threatening the Emirate, if they go ahead with the peace process. So even though the news was good, a lot of people, saw it as a sense of maybe things go forward for this, but still be cautious to see how the further step can take place.
Do you think the Iranian regime are worried about being isolated by other countries if there's so many countries signed peace treaty with Israel and the Arab world?
Yes, maybe Arab country, Emirate, the Gulf countries, besides Saudi Arabia and all around Israel, maybe they're not happy with Israel's policy, but what they're pushing them to forge a peace accord with Israel is they see Iran as a more threat, because Iran, if you remember last year, they were attacked to Saudi Arabia's oil field, Aramco, which is destroyed for a while. It took them a couple of months to rebuild it. So they always have a fear of Iran. So they see it probably, Israel is less threat because Iran is trying to dominate the Islamic affair in the Middle East and the world. And Iran is a different sect of Islam. It's like in Christianity we have a Protestant and Catholic. The war's over a couple hundred years ago, but still in Islam, this rivalry between Islam, Shia, which is Iran is representing, and the Sunni Muslim, which is Saudi Arabia and Persian Gulf. So this rivalry is there, and so this country eventually maybe they're trying to become more close to Israel because they fear more Iran.
What about the war in Yemen? Do you think that peace treaty will agitate the war in Yemen?
The Yemen still is Iran's hand. We can see there. I know Yemen conflict, like Syrian conflict and Iraq war conflict, it caused massive human right, massive human catastrophe happened there. In all war, because all wars mostly civilian, becoming killed. Even though still we have a casualty among soldier army, but the people, ordinary people, kids, malnutrition, lack of nutrition for children, for war, Yemen. Yeah. So we saw now this kind of escalation of the conflict in Yemen, because international community and stuff are trying to stopping the Iranian to arm the Houthis, in the Shia sect there. So we see some halt, but the conflict is still not being over in Yemen because unfortunately all those countries in Middle East, they built at the early 20th century not based on the modern nation state, probably because they divided to tribal things, and so these people are not coming. They have to take time for them, to come up to have a social contract among them, at least to try to. Because every group wanna take over everything there, they don't want to share with each other, which is eventually this benefit all of them. So this conflict between these corrupt leaders, lack of transparency, the arms, so all those things is make it really difficult to come up, the peace. Finally, this region, as you mentioned about Yemen, can see the peace. So this still is really difficult to see how Yemen is going. We should see in the month to come.
If we make a flashback in history, we see in the 20th century we have two peace treaties. If you go 1979 and 1994, and the 21st century we have one. Do you think what needs to be done to create stability in the Middle East?
This is really a difficult question, very, very, very difficult question. I said, because this region, because it's still is rich in mineral, in natural gas, oil is very important, and strategically is very important, because this region is combining the Africa, Asia and Europe together. So it's very, the birth of the religion, still fanaticism, radicalism, Islamism is very high, still as I said, the Muslim world should come up with this kind of reformation, which Christianity did, a couple of hundred years ago. So this all things, the religion, the ethnic rivalry, which is, we have a lot of groups, among them the Kurds. The Kurds are about close to 40 million. They divided in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, and of course the Palestinian faith, eventually. So all these things, so make it really difficult to how to discuss, how bring a recipe for peace in this region. And a lot of U.S. administration, UN, so if you see across the Middle East, we have a United Nations mission stationed there for decades, trying to resolve things. That's close to Middle East and Mediterranean Sea. This Cyprus, the Turkish occupation of the part of Cyprus for almost close to 5 decades, United mission there, so, and across Middle East. So we have all this small pieces, still the wounded is not being recovered from what happened in the past. I think it's too early to try to say how the final piece in mind, not final piece for everything, but at least a sense of stability, what we have, because now we have war all over the Middle East, so it's difficult to say.
The Afghan government released a couple of Taliban's prisoners. Do you think that will create more instability in Afghanistan?
It's very difficult, really, because if you say Afghanistan, prior to coup, in the 70s and 60s, it was very civil society, they were women free, I'm sure if you saw the pictures and how Afghans lived there. But under Taliban and then Islamism in a war conflict between Soviet Union at the time and Islamists, eventually when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, the women, especially, which is half of the society, they lost their right. So now, after 2 decades war in Afghanistan, which is unresolved, and Taliban has a control of half of the country, and the peace accord is good. The people think eventually, because the conflict be over, but civil society and women out fear returning to Taliban, at least to power, political power. They go return back what they happened to them 2 decades ago. So I think I'm not optimistic what's happening in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Mr. Salah, director of the Komala Party Human Rights Organization, Komala Party, or Iranian Kurd. Thank you very much for being on the show. We hope to see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Anything you need to know. Who, what, when, where, why, how.